Welcome to lesson 9 on our big question, why did people migrate? The title today is How Have Migrants Changed Britain Over Time, part 1, and we're going to have our second part in our next lesson. What I'd like you to do at the moment is write down the title at the top, the keywords in bold and their definitions as normal. So pause the video and complete that now, please. So again, as normal, I'll connect 6 questions for you to answer in full sentences. What I'd like you to do is pause the video because then on the next slide I'm going to put the answers to these 6 questions. So obviously you could cheat and that would mean you do it much more quickly, but if you can do these 6 questions without doing that, without looking ahead, then that's going to test how much you're really taking in, so that when we come back then you'll be better prepared. So pause the video now, and then once you've completed these 6 questions, move on to the next slide for the answers. So here are the answers in red, so maybe mark them yourself, have a look at any that you didn't get, just maybe write them in green pen or a different colour. So what we have here are 3 definitions of migration, 3 summaries of migration based on what we've looked at in our course so far. You've got 3 numbers, and what I'd like you to do is write down the definition that you agree with most once you've read all 3. So don't write down a number, write down the actual definition because we'll return to this towards the end of the lesson. Each of these definitions has some truth in it, lots of truth in it, but which one do you agree with most? Once you've had a read, then write down the one on your paper that you agree with most. So pause the video and complete that now. For our activate, this lesson is slightly different to the ones that we've had previously. This one we're looking back on all the different topics that we've looked at so far and then thinking how much change has actually happened. So whereas in previous lessons we've had lots of information, lots of content, we're now focusing more on the skills. So being able to say how much migration has changed over time. So what you're going to do is use the grid that I'm going to put on the next slide, as well as your own knowledge from the previous lessons, in order to complete these 3 activities. The first one I would recommend doing on kind of a clean page of paper. If you've got big paper, A3 paper, then obviously that would be a really good thing to use. But if you've only got A4, then draw that out on there. And if you're doing it on a Word document, then I'd recommend putting it as landscape. And then using the grid on the next slide and the knowledge you have from your previous lessons, add to this timeline all the information for push and pull factors. So look back at your work that you've hopefully still got, look at the different tables that you've been making on push and pull factors and add them in as well. And then finally add to your timeline the information about their impact. For each impact, maybe colour code, so make a key. Was it a cultural reason why someone moved country, an economic reason, so to do with money, or was it a political factor? And on the grid there'll be a couple of examples there. So pause the video, read through those tasks. I'll put the grid on the next slide, and you'll probably need to go between these 2 slides a few times in order to do this task. So for this slide, this is the grid of information that you will need to use in order to help you complete the activities on the slide before. What you've got is 3 columns, who migrated, and all the different groups that we've looked at so far in this topic on the far left of this grid. The second column, some of the push and pull reasons why they might have moved country, and I've started to highlight some of those to make sure that they're push and pull, which will hopefully help you. And then in the final column, you've got what did they do, so what was their impact when they did arrive in the country. And you can see the example for the Celts has already been done. So ironwork and the plough are economic reasons because they help people make more crops, which they could then sell. But they also brought in new festivals such as May Day and Halloween, which are to do with culture. So cultural things, which I've put in purple. What I'd like you to do is use this grid. So again, you'll need to pause the video here and go between this slide and the slide before in order to complete the 3 tasks. So take your time. This is the big task of our lesson, and complete that now, please. Sure to demonstrate, so 3 quick activities. 1 and 2, pull factors, how did they change over time? So use your timeline and see, is there difference in why people move country? Was it originally about money or about culture and then change to be political? Or did it kind of change back and forth a little bit? Just write a couple of sentences answering that question. For question 2, what do you think is the most important pull factor that brought people to Britain since the Celts all the way to what we looked at last lesson with the Windrush generation? So is there something that keeps coming up time and time again that draws people into Britain? Maybe write a sentence or 2 again answering that question. And then finally, which group of migrants do you think had the most significant influence? Which group changed Britain the most from what we've learned so far? Maybe use the short-term and long-term impact. So could their results be seen for a long time or not? And then also think about the cultural, economic and political factors. Were there lots or were there some really big ones as well? Looking for a bit more of a paragraph there as well. Finally, consolidate. So looking back to one of the activities we did earlier in the lesson, our 3 summaries of migration. You chose one of these. So remind yourself, which one of these summaries did you choose at the beginning of the lesson? And then just write a sentence explaining why did you pick that definition, if you're still in agreement with it at the end of the lesson. Or after looking at everything, having it all laid out in front of you on your timeline, have you changed your mind? And if so, why have you changed your mind? Again, just write one sentence, depending on whether you still agree with the version of the summary of migration or if you've changed your mind.